Yeah, so like it was understood because it means this child looks like his sister. And it was nice.
And I think if your phone's doing sound and it plays itself, to get that feedback twice is very good. Sort of. We're talking about horses.
It's like one shoulder, not just one shoulder.
I think the days that go away, right?
It was my first, and I was like, I just
I'm not.
my first
What's the name of it?
Zoo. It's a little bit older. It's been out for a minute. You have to.
I said you're writing something with that.
You have to write it.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Molly Kelly Brown. I'm an assistant professor of English and creative nonfiction here at ODU. I'm one of the co-directors of this year's literary festival. I want to say a couple of thank yous before we get started this evening. The first is to Colin Strong and Sarah Glazer at Arts at ODU and all of the labor that they have done making this year's 45th annual literary festival happen. The second is to the Office of the Dean and the Office of the President for all of their support, and to the English Department for all of their support. And the third and fourth most important are to Woody Robinson and the staff of the University Theater for running our event this evening. And to the wonderful staff of the University Bookstore for being here to sell books directly after the reading, directly by the stage, so that you have the opportunity to get them signed and speak to the author in person. I have to say that this day of the Literary Festival is a particularly special one for me as it relates to our theme, sustaining community, because in addition to introducing writers who are a really wonderful and important and vibrant part of this country's literary community, I also get to introduce two writers who are a part of my community. The first is the poet Sarah Matthes, who's reading for us right now. And Sarah Matthes is a poet from Central New Jersey. Her debut collection of poetry, Town Crier, won the Lexi Rudnitsky First Book Prize and was a finalist for the National Jewish Book Award. She's received support for her work from the Yiddish Book Center and the Chiwetel Ranieri Foundation, and is the recipient of the 2019 Torhouse Prize from the Robinson Jeffers Foundation. A graduate of the Mishner Center for Writers, she still lives in Austin, Texas, where she serves as the managing editor of Bat City Review and teaches poetry at UT Austin. But really, none of these things are the important things that you need to know about Sarah. The first time I ever spoke to Sarah Matthes, we talked on the phone about the logistics, luck, complexity, and anxiety of publishing your first book, while she kept her eyes peeled for whales on a boat in Hawaii. The first time I met her in person, we spent about 5 consecutive hours discussing our childhoods and families, teachers' loves and griefs, over old fashions at a bar in Texas in the earliest days of March 2020, alternately laughing and looking at one another in fear as the strange and uncertain shape of the coming pandemic loomed in the immediate distance. The next time I saw her, she arrived in a windbreaker and a baseball cap in the small gilded lobby of a restaurant, reaching down to pull out of her bag not a book or a pen or a stowed umbrella, but a small taxidermied bat, fragile and weird and lovely inside a glass cloche. "Look what I have," she told us, smiling brightly. And really, I can't think of a better triptych of interactions to describe either Sarah or her poems, positioned at the place where the utterly wild and the daily and pedestrian collide, where loss and hilarity, grief and grace, anxiety and intimacy coexist, not only sidling up to one another, but touching shoulders, standing arm in arm, their fingers interlaced. The poems in Sarah Matthes' debut make me feel more alive, writes Lisa Olstein. And it's true. I've never read a more heartening, funnier, or less easy book about grief. I read Sarah's poems and I feel my blood pumping, not because the world is kind or because I am strong, but because somewhere out there, there is someone laughing. And more importantly, someone saying, writing as Sarah does, it's okay. It's okay. I'm here. I love you. Please join me in welcoming Sarah Matthes.
I'm Brooklyn. That was really, really beautiful. Thanks, Molly. Sorry, that got me like a little emotional. Molly, as you probably know, is an extraordinarily talented writer, and hearing her use her mind on my work is just kind of an honor. So, okay, I'm gonna shake it off. Hello, hi. I'm so happy to be here with you. Thank you so much to Old Dominion for having me, and for all of you for coming out to see poetry at 4 p.m. on a Wednesday. Good yontif to those who observe. Hope you've had an easy fast. I didn't do it. I was going to, but then Molly took me to a ramen restaurant, so it's not my fault, and I'll spend the rest of the day atoning for that. It's Yom Kippur in case you aren't Jewish or aren't Jewish adjacent. And if you're not Jewish adjacent, you're about to be, because some of these are moments are pretty Jewish. So yeah, I'm going to be reading from my collection. Oh, I should take the stickies off. Town Crier, and I'm just gonna sort of start off with a poem that I'm going to mostly read chronologically because of all the time and effort I put into thinking about that. But I'm going to start with a poem later on that I kind of think of as a little bit of an invocation. It's called Listen, There Are Demons in Your Well. And that's the line from this Yiddish folktale I was reading, where a man is visited by somebody who's trying to diagnose the problem in his life. And he says, listen, there are demons in your well. And I thought that was great diagnosis. So that's this one. I am bound in a complicated braid. Voices, they wind through my many ducts, ventricles and veins, round vowels. An O is just a paper towel roll, impossibly knocked over in a midnight kitchen. In bed, I wonder why the cat is shaking, until I realize I'm shaking, and that I'm shaking the cat. Listen, I know that there are demons in my well. I can feel their round fists pounding my empty cavities. The stories tell me to extricate my demons, I need only throw my nagging wife down my well, and she will drive them away. Being my own wife, I chuck myself into the dark. I fall for a very long time. Turning myself inside out is much less terrifying than expected. It's really good to see you. I'm gonna read mostly chronologically from that point on, starting with the first poem in the book, which is called The Basics. I thought I understood the basics. My body would be put through a series of trials. I understood the surface of the water, when broken by a chucked stone, would reassemble itself around the sharp intruder. I would not be so constant. Even when the news of blood reached me, even when the white moon sat in the white cloud of day, I believed in a deep magnetic resolution. The way I believe in the inevitability of separated twins colliding at the market. But then one day, rewarding myself for a month of consistent and vigorous exercise, I took a scenic byway through the nearby mountain, and spotting something in the road ahead, I slowed to discover one chipmunk, face deep in a second dead chipmunk, its little mouth trembling in the soft, still fur, and I couldn't find a way around that. I lived for years within that. What kind of mind is unable to recognize the difference between a chipmunk in mourning and a chipmunk having lunch? I couldn't believe they let me start the book by saying chipmunk 4 times. Okay, here's one that's sort of Jewish. Ready? Here we go. This one starts with a Yiddish proverb, which is a proverb tells the truth. A little self-referential. Yeah, it's called All Spruced Up. The poem's called All Spruced Up. You can't grow corn on the ceiling is a Yiddish phrase I particularly relate to. Not because I farm, per se, but but because I often feel the weight of large jeweled objects dropped into my hands, and tend toward hanging those kinds of things by a string from the ceiling as opposed to burying them and showing patience. Imagine how wrong we all have it. Had we just buried the mirror ball like God intended? Fuck. What sterling trees bearing gleaming disco fruities? I am smoked by the silver images. You can't outrun the moon is another phrase that brings me solace because yes, thank you, I do feel that the moon has been chasing me, which is, I think, what they call vanity. A man should stay alive if only out of curiosity is good advice, though I fear most people pay attention more to the man and alive and less to the if only. The phrase all spruced up could otherwise be said Havala suitor get, which means like Eve on her way to get a divorce. Imagine her stepping out of her bone cage, ready to love the dark. I think all spruced up is the most romantic phrase in the whole of my Yiddish phrase book. If only diseases stuck to clothes and thistles to the body. If only the bear were as soft as cooked carrots. If only the goose hadn't starved in those oats. If only thieves loved darkness for the same reason you and I do. Yes, you with the punam. And what do we say of God? That his ear is an oyster? That it glitters even in the mud? Or was that gold? No, that's what never rusts. Never rusts. That was rain. No, not rain. Or was that heaven? This book, as Molly mentioned, is in some ways a grief book, which maybe isn't super evident in those poems, but it becomes evident pretty quickly. And that the book experiences a loss pretty early on and then spends the rest of the book processing that, sometimes knowingly and sometimes I think the poems didn't know that, I didn't know that. I keep finding out ways in which things that I thought were about something else were about this grief, like chipmunks. But here's sort of like the first hint of it maybe. This poem is called The Jungle of Sick Animals. You are there, and you are the king. This is announced by a wreath of grapes, cold and elegant against your head's bare skin. When the grapes get too hot in the jungle sun, they are rushed to a quick river and made cool and bright again. They go through many cycles of this. They're very resilient grapes. You are my most resilient grape. Inside your body dangle hundreds of short white strings. Inside your body lives a red tentacled cell that is trying to collapse you by pulling every string. You don't have time to shrivel. You are the king and have things to attend to. Look, here comes a sad blue animal who cares too much about her hair. Care about it for her. There goes a sturdy little bug whose spirit is dying. Give her a grape. And the small animals sleep in hammocks of big animals. And the big animals gather their bodies in a warm circle. And the rain says, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I'm leaving immediately. It feels good to have finally written a poem about your wedding. Okay, I'm just sort of like, I didn't make a plan. You can see these are old plans, but I didn't make a plan. I sort of thought maybe I would just read what felt right in the moment. Sometimes I try to like really curate it. This poem's gotta go with this one. And if you're gonna skip this, you can't have those two birds right next to each other, they'll notice. And I just, I don't really think I wanna like worry that much about poetry, you know? I was like introducing a lot of worry into my life about something that otherwise I used to try to like step away from that, I think, or process it. So I'm not worrying, I'm not worried, and I'm gonna just read what I want. So how about, okay. This one's called, Are You Grateful for the Time We Shared? Were you looking for something in nature that isn't yourself after all this time of being human? A zipper unzips, a worried bird. The day perfected, there is nothing left to be done. We stare off into a gray, apassive sky. Who is in charge here? The birds assemble into a train track, which soon explodes into no birds. See the dog digging in the cooling sand, the humans a little farther off and digging too, drilling down a long log collaboratively into a ditch. Sorry. See the dog digging in the cooling sand, the humans digging too, drilling down a thick, long log to be discovered later by a beaching stranger who will delight in the trunk bursting out of the beach and marvel at just how deep down it must go. The sea is the air for everything else. The clouds are like beards of men with no faces. Oh no, behold, the saddest thing in the world. A youth has sidled up to the log, straddling it for a picture, the whole thing an elaborate penis joke, the picture snapped, the heart destroyed. There is no safety save my hands over my ears, my nose plugged up by other hands, my eyes afraid to open to find out whose hands. See, I messed up a little bit there in the middle, but I decided, don't worry. This poem is called 613. I should have known that was going to happen. I got close. This poem is called 613 Mitzvot. Those are the like commandments you're supposed to follow as a Jewish person. It's a big number, 613. And I wrote this poem when I was reading all of them. Yeah, 613 Mitzvot. I've been to this park before. I'm starting to accrue on this place. My presence a little bump of spackle where a better picture hung. A Tinder message comes in. Wait, is that you in the park right now? It feels so good to be recognized. I shut that down fast though by talking too much about the 613 mitzvot and the categories into which I am sorting them. Confusing, amazing, terrifying, important. The guy was like, okay. You know how it feels when you're onto something? The sea closing up behind Moses and Aaron, inventing the zipper eventually. A cloud exhaling slow over the sun, shapes moving on the grass. I lived my whole life thinking I mostly got it. There would be hardships, sure, but there would also be cross stitches, paring knives, parables, ways. Then the arrival of blood and its usual readjustments. Then the condemnation of love, first God of my life, followed shortly by trees, steam, travel by wind. And then today, these 613 new little gods, not to eat things that swarm in the water, not to muzzle a beast while it is working in produce, which it may taste and enjoy, not to leave something that might cause hurt, not to seek the dead. Anyway, 6 + 1 + 3 = 10, which is my favorite number. And 6 - 1 - 3 = 2, which is, you guessed it, my other favorite number. Is this a numerological mysticism? Is this the transformation of 10 to 10, of 12 to a dozen, of 2 inevitably to parting? Somewhere in the number line there exists my perfect balanced name. Imagine it, self, SE.LF, a quantity of language, more than I or me. Sarah, point H, with her dangling breath. Her name, the red leave a penny dish into which we drop a copper H, suddenly with something to give. But some days the decimal shifts underneath me. Some days I am floating with my ears below the wa point turf. Love, rounded up, becomes the way I feel without it, low. God wakes me up, and all that's left by night is go. Okay, this is a love poem. It's called Love Poem. Some days I wake up and it is terrifying. A dream of you is only good while it's happening. Then it's just pissing with an open door, missing the deeply imagined thing. wondering, how will I ever know if I really came in my sleep? You're so enthusiastic. Your household dehydrator has been used by your midwife roommate for her clients' many placentas. The machine is clean and damp on the drying rack. You could proceed. You could make your beef jerky. But instead you must call and tell me about the dehydrated placenta. This is one way that you tell me that you love me. Another is when you leave a package in the freezer clearly marked, snake, do not eat. I appreciate that. But some days affection is a salve we rub over affliction, like the way you take the unknown calls that come into my phone from 609 area codes and never disparage me for assuming they carry news of fresh death. The way once you listened as I practiced a eulogy between bites of pickled radish. Do you remember that dim afternoon? Curled like quotation marks on the bed, a mouth opened between us. Holding each other, kissing casually, you started to squirm, rolling your forehead over and over my chest. Do you remember how you said it, the very first time you said it? You answered, I love you. I had asked, what's wrong? I'm from New Jersey. That has, up until this point, been basically my only personality trait. I bring it up whenever possible. Anyone? Woo. Yeah? Oh.
Oakland, New Jersey.
Say that again?
Oakland.
Oh my gosh, amazing. I'm from East Windsor. It's near Princeton. But yeah, I love New Jersey. I love the mall, pizza, bagels, the ocean, and foliage, and driving. You know, the basics. So some of these poems are about New Jersey also. And this one, it's I think a rule, if you are a poet from New Jersey, you've got to write about the cicadas. And so here's mine. This is my cicada poem. It's called The 17-Year Cicadas. We dared each other to eat them. $1 for the hollow husk, 2 for the living ones. Some bodies are warmer than others. Some sweat is so sweet. Wading ankle deep in the crisp, dead foliage of wings, I got to touch you, brushing one off your neck, pinky skimming the hot cotton of your summer shirt. You lit up. Either your chest beating forward or your shoulders cringing away. And that distinction making all the difference in my world. And I was unsure, and I was ashamed. And then I went around touching everyone for years, blaming cicadas. Can you imagine it? Standing young and shoeless in a purple dusk, wondering where did all those bodies go? They were just here, right here. The sound still humming in your memory like a grooved tinnitus. Can you discern it? The difference between what you loved and what was there. The trees so empty, the fields so still, like the living room the morning after a party when you wander downstairs to find everyone has rolled away their sleeping bags and gone to the lake without you. I'm going to keep in with the Jersey theme and read this poem, which is called Harder All the Time to Go Back to New Jersey. I love it there, but you know, going home's complicated. So, harder all the time to go back to New Jersey. My old friend makes me sit in the car forever when we get to the bar to feel the way the engine purrs or something. And having never participated in such a traditional show of homo-vehicular sensuality, I sink into the seat and paw his jacket for a lighter. Hold my cold hands up to my cold face. Try to discern what is colder. Inside eventually, there is all-you-can-eat crab. Someone else is eating in quantities so normal, it breaks my heart. Put on something sad, friends. Let's clear this place out. I remember when, low brown ceiling, mural of women in stiff bonnets. Look, I know how to pour a beer so it doesn't foam over, I just didn't. Across from me is a girl who greatly hurt a friend of mine, who in 2 weeks' time will greatly hurt me. So, pick your battles. The one I pick with her tonight is about our order of potato skins. I want to know, what do they do with the potatoes? They skin them, she says. I hate her so much I want to kiss her. Long and surprising with the loudest wah. Everyone is outside smoking. I'll go when they come back. Behold, an orphaned potato skin. I set it down like a boat in the closed sea of my glass, watch the salt blast the beer into a fizzing electric kiss, and go back. Pop rocks, purple skies, under the Bradford pear trees. There's a special darkness cast around a single light left on at home. Sometimes I think if I had known they were just joking about eating the roach, if I hadn't pretended my voice was gone a full day after it had come back, if only I had known that the ones I would love were the ones that would never leave, and that the staying would make them so unlovable. Here's a little one that I don't know that I've ever read in front of people. It's called Subject. Maybe at the end of it, you'll be like, I know why. Put that one back in the arsenal. Subject. I wanted to make a museum comprised entirely of relics from my most beloved friends. I wanted to put strange fuzz under glass and keep it forever strange and fuzzy. During the period of my life where I daily scooped lint from my love's belly button and kept it safe in a plastic bag, you alone, I told. You understood my foresight, the deep spice of the invasion and its promise of good kindling for fire. In my museum, your plinth would be empty, glass trapping a piece of air, dark and full of gravity. Here's another shorter one that I also don't know that I've ever read out loud. So getting a hot exclusive. Alert. Sorry, I'm just trying to be conscientious of time. I'm not texting. That would be fun though. Be like, come on. Okay, amorphism. There must be a song that birds use to describe the motion of our human commutes, or the family tree of a tree drawn in the shape of a man recycling himself underground. There must be an anglerfish so deep in the squeeze of the ocean's core, alighting its ancient leather face like a nightmare in the nightlight in the night. I love the Komodo dragon sleeping in the zoo, his poisoned tongue locked in his jaw, his breath bluing the glass for a moment like smoke. I love the Loch Ness Monster because I know she is a stick. Those sticks are some animals. I'm really just rocking through them. Here's a poem that has been with me for a long time. Its first iterations were in my college thesis, which I say just because, I don't know, it's kind of maybe interesting to track how some poems happen and you leave them behind and you think that's that, and then suddenly there's new relevancies and other work that you're making. And I don't know, I just sort of like an old friend, so it's nice to be able to read it now, knowing that I also did in a different version in 2012. It's called Romney the Mouse. Rodney, my angel, my midnight hunter, my regular family man. Tonight, no one is watching the moon lay its satins across the tile. No one hears the cold kick the pane glass. No one cleaned the egg pan either. This is your world, Rodney. I've been noticing recently that my shits are beginning to look more like your shits. Rodney, is this because we're on the same diet? Are we made of the same tubes, the same gauze that keeps it together? Little Lord, sweet patriarch, I'm going to kill your family, one by one in a snap trap in the closet. I stiffen each tail to wire a hard little lightning strike. Your wife is a hedonist. She lives in my oven. Rodney, I've been having this recurring dream. It always starts the same way. Palms full of tiny mouse ears. I peel another off my eyeball like a contact lens. I place the ears on the pads of my fingertips and hold them out in clemency. Then one by one, I eat them. This is usually something done at a party, sexily, with olives. That was a real mouse. I didn't kill him. That's just in the poem. I didn't kill him. I tried. I was trying to be like, don't worry, like I'm an animal lover. I am, but it wasn't because it's because I'm bad at it. But he lived, and actually, eventually, my roommate did kill him, and we were very sad about that. In a way, it's a complicated end to a long, long relationship. And then the next day, we saw him again because surely it's one mouse there. Or many, many more. And in fact, who was Rodney? You know, he was never one mouse, probably. He was probably many mice. A little Spartacus moment. All right, I'm gonna read. Okay, I'm gonna read a few more, I think, and then we'll do something else. Who knows? I got a mic, I got a stage. Okay, I'm gonna read this poem as the book sort of like navigates through the loss of this like dear friend. Toward the end, it sort of moves toward this cycle that I kind of think of as like death and habitation poems. So I think for a lot of the book, like the poems are like trying to engage with like anything but the fact of that grief, and it keeps sort of popping up. I mean, it's full of like other griefs and other distractions and a lot of other, you know, very specific nouns that have nothing to do with loss. But then toward the end of the book, the poems start to sort of like move toward it a little bit and almost try to sort of join the person that is gone, at least in spirit, and then sort of work through whether or not that's effective. So this poem is sort of the beginning of that. It's called Self-Portrait at the End of My Life. I do remember beauty, a blue pool in the pine barrens, tangles of hair on a soft stomach, my lips combing through them. Working hard and quick on a fire in the black backyard, knowing soon I'd see those bright lit faces bursting through the screen door, saying, there you are. And then being alone, howling on the mountain until my spirit expands, pans out, and sees my body disappear below the tree line. Or the expansive solitude of being a child in the backseat of the car on a long trip home. My head cradled in the sling of seatbelt, the hum of adult voices, the dark and permeable glass, the sky spilling in. Still, I wanted the next thing. To collapse the paper dolls of my life back into the flank of the aspen. To hear the insides, like floating with your ears below the water. I thought that's what I was getting now, though I always pictured it differently. I thought I'd be floating on my back. This is another of that sort of cycle called wet body, hot stone. In everything, I see only myself. No need to paint irises on stones. Dark fish gasp across rapids, and my lungs and stomach gather in a tight bouquet to spice the blood. I cut my finger. The skin grows back strong and smooth, a new bright brick in my barricade. Then comes the night, and there are no stilting treetops to make into fingers, no nape of neck pressed into this ditch of clay. Night eats the liver out of the river's stunned pools. There must be more left than my mind. Universe, please, Send me the shade of someone I love. The old woman made of nightmare who sits on my chest, even she has her bad dreams. My life has been the wet imprint of someone else's body as they rise from a wide, hot stone and take to the river to rinse again. When I die, free me from parallel. Let me feed every tree. Okay, I think that I'm gonna do just, a couple more. So this one, I just thought maybe it would be fun. I don't know about fun. I haven't done a fun poem in a minute. Is this one fun? The title of this one is fun. The title of this one is, Just Now with Arms Outstretched, You Burst into the Room and Seize Your Old Soccer Trophy. Exclamation mark. I'll read it. Just now with arms outstretched, you burst into the room and seize your old soccer trophy, only to remove the box of nails tucked as a plinth beneath it. You select one, delicately, and return to your hammer. But oh, the moment as it had been. The electric silhouette of someone who, working in the yard, is gripped with a sudden and perfect need to hold their plastic trophy. It's always the same. Time moves through things I love and it moves them and is breaking. I guess it didn't end very fun. Well, maybe this one a little bit. I think maybe this is gonna be my last one, and then I'll say thank you, and maybe if you have questions, I'd be happy to do my very, very best to answer them. But yeah, thank you so much for listening to just me saying poems to you in the dark. It's pretty cool. It's like it's a wild experience, and I'm really grateful for all of you for spending your time this way. Okay, I'll do one more. It's called Lament for the Living. And this is like the full expression of the like moving toward the death. This is written from the perspective of the dead. I was writing about the dead and thinking about the dead so much, and I was like, maybe they are tired of that. And they're kind of like, no, stop it, leave us alone. So this is written from their perspective, and it's called Lament for the Living. We feel them walking over us in their intolerable shoes, knocking down our stone doors. And what would they have us do? Come outside? We will not afternoon among the pigeons who loiter like blanched old men in a sauna, moaning, but meaning to say, shut the door, but meaning, let this day end me. Their dicks lolling across their thighs, gummy and white as gefilte fish. Overwrought? Yes. But this is just one tunnel through the story, and it is not one that leads to some outside that is sweet and green. What if we had known we were in the last 5 years of our lives? What a relief. To look around and say how fine it is, to awaken in the cracked sun, to knock back a berry into our mouths like a large and living pill. To have 2.5 years to eat before our time is reset into a new measure of halfness, and it goes. For decades, we split ourselves across the longing of an asymptote, until one day we reach down to wipe and we're putting our hands through a ghost. And then it becomes intolerable, like fruit salad, a grape disguised in the juices of a cantaloupe. We leave behind a dotted line, and all these people, they follow it like a map to heaven, when what we meant was cut here. Thanks.
Can we take some questions?
Sure. I feel deeply sheepish.
Yeah, I already see one of the audience.
Yeah, for sure. Hi.
Thank you for reading. Some of your, there was some funny moments in your poem. That's not the question. And I'm wondering, when you wrote them, did you think they were funny?
Was I trying to be
I don't
funny?
know. Yeah, did those moments come?
So Sarah, let me
right.
let me repeat his question for our streaming audience. He mentioned that there are some funny moments in Sarah's poems, and wondered whether the humor throughout them in the book was intentional or not, and what that was like.
It's thank you for thinking that there were some funny moments. That's so cool. I don't think that that's like what I'm ever trying to do exactly. Certainly when I find that is like a beat that occurs, it's such an amazing opportunity to like present really quickly a range of experience, especially when like, it's funny, I don't think I actually even read like a ton of the poems that were like, grief, like they're in there, but in that context, I like having that sort of range of experience. You know, the haha sad thing is always tried and true. But I think for me, it's about anxiety. I sort of think that a lot of the moments that feel like maybe funny, or I imagine uncomfortable sometimes, it's always interesting reading this to an audience because like certain words come up and I can feel people be like, ew. And yeah, you're right, like there's some you know, visceral content, but for me, that's kind of comes from a place of an anxious mind that is working through things that maybe otherwise they wouldn't share with people. I think of my poems coming, at least in this book, coming from this place of like both the deep, you know, when you like practice a speech in the mirror, have you ever done that in your whole life as a kid, as an adult, anytime? There's something like deeply earnest about that act, and there's also something sort of humiliating about it. And that tension is like where and the voice ends up kind of heading. So I'm less thinking about like making jokes. I love funny poetry, and I certainly know poets who I would consider funny poets. I don't really think of myself that way so much as like I'm interested in a variety of tones occurring over the course of a collection. Yeah.
What's your favorite poem?
What's my favorite poem?
Yeah.
Whoa. Like of all of time?
I was thinking more like your own poems.
Oh, what's my favorite poem I've written?
Yeah.
Whoa, that's really interesting. I don't know that I have a favorite one. I think that I'm most interested in like what is coming next. It's really like a joy to share this book, but I also have been, reading from it over and over, it really changes your experience and relationship to it. And so the way that I'm feeling right now is I'm most compelled by the things that I'm doing now that are different than what I've done before. And the fact that they are different is extraordinarily encouraging to me because it means I'm not like done. But of this book, like the one that I think was the most interesting for me and gave that kind of experience of newness and while I was writing being like, oh, that's a discovery that I didn't know, was the one I read, 613 Mitzvot, that has like the stuff at the end about like quantities of language in it. And I remembered writing toward that and being like, whoa, like this is a weird way of thinking about language, and like I could have some fun playing around with what it would mean to round up a word. So that's probably my favorite one to share just on a personal level, because I like to inhabit that space in my head. Yeah.
So I'm kind of interested in the process when you're writing a new poem. So do you show drafts to people in your life? And if you do, who is the person in your life that you take along with you on the journey to a new poem?
Wow, I'm going to repeat that because that was a good question, and I want our audience to hear it. So you asked about the process by which a poem comes into being. You asked whether Sarah shows drafts to anyone, and if so, is there a single person who you sort of take along for the whole journey and who sees a poem at every stage?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's also like this book is dedicated to the person that was that person for me for a long time, who's a really amazing poet, Matthes. If you haven't read his work, I really recommend it. He's one of my best friends and was my first reader. And like the thing I said at some point about like, oh, you can't read like the 2 bird poems in a row, but nobody else actually cares about that. That's the kind of stuff we would talk about, you know, like really, you know, he like helped me put together the order of the poems for my grad school applications. Like having someone that's that invested in the minutia of of your of your collective work is such a gift. And I would show him my work. And it was really, really difficult, obviously, to write this book without him, also just to, be without him. But I found other people, I thought maybe I wouldn't. I thought maybe it was like the great love of my life of poetry, and that would be it. But I have been really blessed to, I don't think I've ever used that word before. I'm really lucky to have met friends in my MFAs who are poets. And I show my work a lot of the time to my friend who's a poet, whose book is also amazing. Talk about an actually funny poet, Chessie Normile, whose book, Great Exodus, Great Wall, Great Party, definitely check out. But she read every single poem in this book in different stages. And I feel very grateful for that.
Sarah, will you tell the story about the things that you guys have been looking up recently?
Oh,
yeah, and being, because this is the best poet story of all time.
I don't even know. Molly was telling me, she was asking if I had ever looked up, because I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, Molly was telling me that she asked me if I'd ever seen Google images of dogs mixed with corgis. And I said, no, I had not, but I was very interested. And, but that I had recently spent some time for like an hour with that particular friend, being like, look at this flower at Google Images, and being like, do you know about this flower on Google Images? But
this is what people think poets do, is spend time Googling flowers and talking about them to each other, but actually it's what Sarah does.
We talk about other things too, like Survivor, you know? Yes.
How did you come to memorize each poem presentation?
Oh, I'm glad someone asked about this. So those of you streaming in can probably see that Sarah knows her poems by heart. And Ben just asked how you came to memorize each poem and what that was like.
Yeah. It's an accident, and I wouldn't say necessarily that it's. I have had in my life a very, very good memory, and I also tend to compose while I am walking. I'll sort of think and walk, and then a line will enter my head and sort of swirl around, and that's the origin of a lot of the work. And I like to read out loud to hear what it sounds like. And I just found that I started to memorize a lot of the poems, and that through the revision process, whether or not I could say them without looking at the page was a pretty good indication of whether or not they're done, which is actually really interesting for me when I read this book, because there are poems that I often fumble on, and I think that they're probably not done, even though they are published, which is a thing that can happen. So it sort of happened just because it started to, and I found that if I brought my book up and had it open but was looking up all the time, it started to distract me, actually. I was sort of split between these two experiences, and so I just decided to choose one of them. But it's interesting, I don't know that I'm going to keep doing it. For what happens next. I feel like it has felt really right for me for these poems for that same kind of reason, that they feel like they come from this voice that is like really trying to make connection through kind of like difficult topics, through like sharing, oversharing, and then recontextualizing and processing. And I sort of wonder, as my poems evolve, whether it will feel right to keep doing that. I don't know yet. But right now it is the thing that feels more correct than having pages. Oh, and when I was younger, I would be very nervous, so I'd shake. I'm still very nervous, but I don't shake right now. Yes.
Hi, thank you for reading. Again, I want to reiterate, it is really funny sometimes. But also, like, there's moments of seriousness, and you talk about in your collection that, like, by the end of it, you say you're starting to like narrow in on that actual like moment of grief. And I was just wondering, can you talk about how like the whole collection works together? And especially in the sense that like for the first part, you said you're like actively avoiding the thing that it's actually about.
Yeah, so Henry just asked a great question about the sort of the shape of the whole collection, and the fact that Sarah was talking about the fact that sort of as the book begins, she's kind of avoiding the central grief at the heart of the collection, and then towards the end she's narrowing in on it and starting to zoom in on it, and we wondered if she would talk a little bit about the shape of the book and the way that the poems are working as a whole, not just as individual pieces.
Yeah, I think when I look down at this like table of contents, like I know and I can track this like arc that I like wonder sometimes, you know, how much that happens for folks who read the book, and I'd be curious. Yeah, you let me know. But I think for me, the way that this book was made is I got to grad school and my friend died the first day of classes, and that was a very difficult way to start school, and especially because he had been so involved in my writing, and so I started writing pretty poorly for like a really long time. All these poems that were really like therapy, and it took me a while to decide to like look away from it in my work and try to focus on something else. And so I ended up, and then I went back to some of those original poems and I revised them, and they weren't so terrible anymore. I had these sort of two stacks, and I thought for a while that they would be these two books. If anyone has read Brenda Hillman's Bright Existence and Death Tractates, they're amazing like sister volumes that had a really similar kind of story behind them while she was writing through a grief that she had experienced. And they ended up in these two different volumes. And for a minute, I thought maybe that was where I was headed. But then when I looked at the poems that were about not death, they seemed to have images and references, and at least sort of like some kind of like tissue that connected them to the other ones. And I realized that they shouldn't be separate, and that they in fact were a pretty accurate depiction of like the presentness of both aspects at the same time. And so for me, at first, the order that I had was, it was all like hunky-dory, happy, like chatty, let me tell you about myself and thoughts, and then, uh-oh, death. And then the rest of the book was just processing that, and it never came out of it, and it was so sad. And I sort of thought that was cool. I was like, haha, like that'll be so sad for people. But that didn't feel, but it was the opposite of what had happened. It wasn't what had happened. And so I decided to put the death pretty quickly. Like, I would say, you know, that it's happened probably by page 8 or 9, and then it sits with that for a while. There's a moment in this poem that I didn't read, where the speaker is trying to sort of like identify where an afterlife is while like playing this dream game of pickup sticks with the other person, and then ends up just looking out into the world. It ends, the day was so great and comprehensible. And that moment of sort of like re-entering a very harsh and just sort of quotidian world, that is, in my mind, a break, where the poems now start to kind of move their attention elsewhere, cycling through memory, other losses, relationships, Judaism, like basically trying out every other thing. But I mean, even the love poems are sad in a way. So for me, I felt that engine sort of pull back toward the initial brief. I don't know if this might either be over-explaining or not at all answering your question, but I've been talking too long, so I hope that was a little bit helpful. Yes?
I think you're wonderful to start. I'm curious about your relationship with religion in the book. And I've been thinking of how to structure this question in the most simple way possible, but how do you approach Judaism as a religion and as part of your identity? And how do you approach like that line of offense and internal religion on the page?
Yeah.
That makes any sense.
Yeah, so Tobe asked about Sarah's relationship with religion, and specifically with Judaism in the book, and the way that she approaches that in life and on the page, especially when it comes to sort of the line that you walk when talking about something sacred, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, like my relationship with Judaism growing up was, as it is for I think a lot of for some people, was largely cultural, because my mom didn't really feel like a kind of safe investment in like actively performing Judaism, or like maybe at least it was a wrought relationship because of her family and that history. So I think my entry point was all in these rituals of the holidays. Like today, being here with you today is such an interesting time because like this is this day that is like so sad for her. I guess she's gonna watch this later. But it has this sort of ritual history. And I remembered like learning about it through the food. It was all like through what we ate, or like you know, even this period of time between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is this time of atonement where you're supposed to ask forgiveness of people you wronged, but then also privately forgive people even if they haven't asked you. And for me, like, I don't, without getting too much into like capital R religion, like the parts that have felt good for me are the parts that feel good for me. And those parts are what make me feel connected to a family that I don't know, and to a history that like is a lens through which I can look at the world. But it's just one lens. Like I love to use Judaism and to read Yiddish phrases and to truly like read all of the mitzvot and truly divide them into 4 categories. These are things that I do in my spare time sometimes, because it's a way of engaging with text, really, with the language of a religion or of a group, but also recognizing that like I never engage with any text in my life except through a conversation. Like there is no text that I look at that then becomes in charge of me. And so I find I find it sort of a conversational relationship with it. And I don't know, I think that works for me. Judaism and its sort of foundations, especially in Kabbalah, which is this more sort of mystic side about like the creative power of language, is like also a sort of foundational interest for me. I think I really approach it as like the idea that language has material consequence, which is something that Judaism believes. Yeah. But yeah, I think about it all the time. It's a great question. Thank you for it. Sure. Yeah.
What was it like publishing your first book?
It was weird. It was weird. It was really amazing. Like, I'm enormously grateful, and like being here is like pretty incredible. Things like this make me feel really great, and I love reading poems and sharing them, so the contexts always provide me with a lot of opportunities to do that. But it's a weird process, and I think that the thing that makes it feel less weird is remembering that like there maybe will be a next one, and even if there's not, there'll be a next poem. I think you're catching me at this place where I'm like I want to do something else, you know, and I think the idea of being too mired to this object as like a totem of mine, or that's not the good word to use, but like as a you know, a symbol of my poetry is so limiting. And so really understanding it for what it is an opportunity to curate an experience through poetry, right? It's like one iteration of a lifelong experience. So sort of downplaying it almost has been good for me, to be like, yes, first book, but now I'm just going to call it a book and take that first away and sort of look toward something else. But also it feels amazing. Like I mean, Molly can attest. Like she brought me to the bookstore today to show me the little display, because like it blows my mind, you know? So yeah, cool overall, but strange.
I think that is a wonderful way to close. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us. Back here at 7 p.m. for the novelist PM Tran. And meanwhile, there are copies of Sarah's beautiful book, which is just the beginning, down in front, and she would be happy to sign them for you and talk to you more. Look at it down here.